I was recently in Indianapolis, where I had a meal with an elderly gentleman who is now retired. His name is Aaron York. And when Aaron was in his 20s, he had an experience that changed his life forever. He was an HVAC technician, and back in 1961, his boss sent him on a job to do maintenance on an oil furnace. So he was on site. It was a residential property. He was down in the customer's basement. When he removed the canister to change the filter, some oil dripped onto the customer's concrete floor. So being a young guy and seeing the mess, Aaron thought, I better clean it up. So he went out to the truck, he got a rag, he got a wire brush, he got some cleaner, and he scrubbed the floor, and with the wire brush, he scrubbed the concrete real good. Cleaned it up well, finished the maintenance, went back to the shop. When he got back to the shop, his boss nailed him at the door. And his boss said, what did you do at Ed's house? Customer's name was Ed. And Aaron said, I just did the maintenance on the oil furnace. There was some oil on the floor, and I just cleaned it up. Well, then his boss looked at Aaron, and he said, we've been serving this customer for years. And today he called, and he said, from now on, he just wants you going to his house. He doesn't want the rest of us, because we've been servicing him for years, and he's learned to endure the odor of oil that lasted a month every time we did service on that furnace. But today, no odor. So from now on, he only wants you. And Aaron, as a young technician in his 20s, had that experience, and a young technician thinks to himself, I thought my value was technical. I thought my value was the ability to diagnose, to troubleshoot, to use the tools. I had no idea that I could be valuable in cleaning up a mess. And that changed Aaron's career. And he started the company, and he ran the most profitable contractor dealer in the city of Indianapolis. He was not cheap, but he knew who his customers were. He knew the right neighborhoods where those customers were. He marketed the right way, and he had a thriving business. His children run the business now. And when his technicians show up at a residential property, customers get to see their technicians do the work and then go to the truck and get a brand new clean-looking vacuum cleaner out of the truck, bring it inside the customer's house, and they run the vacuum cleaner where they were doing their work. Mess may not be too bad, but what is that doing? That's the impression. Customers are seeing that, and customers are thinking, wow, these guys really care. So the value that we deliver isn't always in our technical ability. There are other things that customers perceive as value in the work that we do. So in any service company, there's an organizational chart. So in a service company, the owner may be at the top. You may have some managers in the middle. There may be customer service people down towards the bottom, which includes the technicians, the installers, the dispatchers. So we assume that that's the company, represented by that triangle. So you've got the owner at the top, service personnel down towards the bottom. And the apex of that triangle, that top of the triangle, that's the owner. That's the most important person. That's where the culture starts. But in a customer's mind, customers see things in a different way. This is the way a customer sees things, where the apex of that triangle is the service person. Person who shows up on the property, person who picks up the phone, that becomes the apex, the most important part. And when customers get to perceive something extremely valuable about an individual, boy, that's what makes the best and cheapest marketing in town. The cheapest marketing in town is called customer retention. It's when you keep the customers that you have. Keeping the customers that you have, making them happy, and then every now and then asking a happy customer, so tell me, Mitch, who do you know who might benefit from our service? And you may have a neighbor, you may have a cousin, you may have an aunt or an uncle, and customer retention, keeping them happy, and then getting what is called referrals. Right, Mitch? Getting referrals, and who does he know? And happy customers are more than happy to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. And the most valuable thing a technician can do is learn how to ask questions the right way. When you ask a question the right way and you give the customer a chance to talk, they feel good. People just like to talk. So when you ask a question such as, so help me understand how the system is working. That's a very simple question, but what's interesting about the question is the first two words. Help me understand how the system is working. So Ryan, what are the first two words?
Help me.
Help me. Thank you, Ryan. Now, help me, as an opening to a question sentence, does something therapeutic. At a level in the customer's brain, help me invites them to help you. When you're asking that question, you're inviting the other person into a more constructive interaction. You're giving the other person an opportunity to talk. People like to talk about themselves. And knowing how to do that, knowing which words to use, makes the difference. Every now and then I do ride-alongs with technicians, which means I go out in the truck with a technician just so I can assess. So I've got my clipboard, and I just watch and I listen, and I get ideas for how they can improve. And one of the interesting behaviors that I see out in the field often is if a technician pulls up to a customer's house and exits the truck, walks on the driveway, and if the daily newspaper is in the driveway, what does a good technician do? Pick it up. Yeah. You pick up the newspaper, and you're going to be walking to the door anyway, right? So you pick up the newspaper, you walk up to the door, ring the doorbell, you take a step backward. Customer opens the door, and here's your newspaper. And how does the customer feel about you handing them the newspaper? Really good. Nice first impression. And then I hear many technicians blowing it after that. They blow it. Because the customer says thank you, and then the technician says something like, oh, it's no problem. And they completely minimize and diminish the value of that interaction. Saying something such as, it's my pleasure, or this is the service our customers have come to expect. When you use different words, you heighten the level of communication. People will make assumptions based on the words that you use. Saying no problem means something, but saying my pleasure just catches you off guard just a bit. It's like the little tweak of a word when you ask someone, so how can I help you? Or when you ask, so how may I help you? May I is proper grammar, sounds nicer. People assume, wow, good grammar. This guy must be smart. And that's your halo effect, my friend. It speaks loudly. And people make assumptions all day long about what they see, about what they hear. Those little tweaks of the word, they make a difference. Something extremely positive. So what we have to endure from time to time in service is learning. And learning, my friends, is not always easy. Whose life has been a piece of cake so far? Anyone here? Certainly. Every day. Yeah, every day. And tell me your first name. Joe. Joe looks like trouble. But I like Joe. But he's likable. He's got this halo effect happening. And every day, there's learning challenges. People learn, and learning and dealing with adversity and having to rise above the adversity is what advances a person forward. What I like to call that is the fuel. So here's an example of the fuel in someone's life. My wife and I have a 19-year-old. And when he was a little boy, when he was about 7 or 8, he still had training wheels on his two-wheeler. So he had those training wheels on his bicycle. And one day he comes into the house crying to my wife and I because 2 girls down the block had learned to balance their two-wheeler. And they were making fun of our son. They were ridiculing him, and they were calling him names. And he came in crying. Why? Because his feelings were hurt. Boy, that wasn't nice. Politically incorrect behavior. And my wife and I heard all the crying and the whining. And, we chose the tack to say, well, Michael, what are you going to do about this? And that ridicule and that rejection, that motivated him. That was the fuel. Within 24 hours, he learned to balance a bicycle. Because every now and then, you're going to have to deal with something that's not always pleasant. But when you are resilient and adaptable, when you can change, then that becomes the fuel to drive a person forward. So fuel is a pretty important concept for us as we learn. So there's that bicycle, and there's the training wheels. And fuel is important because every now and then you're going to get rejected, and from time to time you may even become reprimanded by someone. Your boss may call you into a room, sit you down at a table, and have a little talk. You know what those talks are like. Not always pleasant. But you know, proper reprimand, it can motivate a person. When you're reprimanded the right way, and when your boss says, you know, we know that you're really good. We want you here. However, what we just witnessed cannot happen again. We'll be listening and watching for the next week. I want to see an improvement. We'll meet again in 1 week, and we'll assess you. Now, that doesn't feel too good, and you don't like the way I'm looking at you right now. And this is exactly what bosses do when they want to do it the right way. Because any employee who has to deal with that, they're in a chair, and they're enduring that glare and that stern language, and they're sitting in that chair, and they're thinking to themselves, man, I don't ever want to have to sit here again. I better improve. And that is the fuel. Drives a person forward. In the early 1990s, I remember reading an article in Fortune magazine in which numerous CEOs were interviewed. And they were asked many questions. And one of the questions they were asked was, what drove you to become such an overachiever? And many of the CEOs being interviewed had a similar answer. Their answer was, I became an overachiever the day that I got cut from the high school baseball team. Or I became an overachiever when I saw my name on the cut list of the football team. When they got rejected was when they put the stick in the mud, line in the sand, and they said to themselves, I'm never going to feel that way again. From now on, I'm going to get there. And they push themselves forward, and they overachieve. So in today's world, getting together and moving forward, it's not always easy, but boy, it's fun when you start to advance yourself. It's fun when we continue to learn. And customers will force you to learn. So some customers may look like this. Now that is called a dreaded morning phone call. And the word dreaded and morning are not by accident. Because what I've seen happen with a person's attitude is when first thing in the morning, you get one of those calls where customers on the phone and they're screaming, my house is cold, my kids are freezing, and I'm furious. And they're on the phone with you, and you're hearing this tone of voice. Boy, what does that tone of voice over the phone make you feel like? Mitch? Low life. Yeah, low life. Like, I don't deserve this. I'm better than this. But if the customer's check's clear, then you're going to hear it. And you're going to deal with it. And first thing in the morning, when you get a call like that, it can impact the rest of your day. Only if you let it. Because we have a choice about our attitude. We have a choice about the thoughts that we think. If you let those early morning calls rattle you to the point where it starts to ruin your day, you lose your sense of productivity and effectiveness in the course of the day. And attitude is almost always a choice. Having the right attitude, staying positive, even in the midst of situations such as that. Because a customer like that who wants to rattle your cage, they're upset, but they also may be trying to get some extra accommodation from you. Who knows what the motive may be? And we must remain calm, because if we get upset or if we get angry, perhaps you have learned, like I have, that when we get angry, we'll make the best speech we'll ever regret. best idea, don't get there in the first place. You have a choice. So you've probably seen this. If you're using the customer service book, you may have seen that image. And we must be prepared for anything. And you've probably seen that image there. A very simple three-step process of a pause, slow, deep breath, and then rational thinking. And rational thinking is the total opposite of irrational thinking. Irrational thinking is a why me? Why do I have to deal with this whiny, high-maintenance customer? Rational thinking is, this customer's check's clear, let's deal with it. Have a positive attitude, ask a question, let the customer vent, because we know rationally that venting can be therapeutic. Right, Antoine? When people vent, they start to feel good. They calm down. And the better listener you are and the more empathy you can convey, we work them down there. And sometimes we find ourselves not just being technical, but we find ourselves being therapists. We're actually asking questions just like a therapist does. And we're nodding our head and we're saying the empathetic things and getting someone to stay calm. So that pause, slow, deep breath, rational thinking, along with attentive listening, and then preparing ourselves to say what we can do, which is not saying what you can't do. It's very easy to say what we can't do. It's easy to say, we can't get there this morning. It's a lot easier to say, we can get there this afternoon. Saying what you can do sounds different to the customer's ears. If you can imagine a door, whenever people say what they can't do, or what we won't do, or our policy doesn't state that, you're slamming the door closed. But whenever we use the phraseology, conveying what we can do, or here's the way we would handle that situation, you're leaving the door open for more dialogue. And what you want with any customer is you want the exchange. You want the two-way exchange. You want the dialogue. And you want to be able to just listen, convey your best effort, and make sure the customer knows that you really care. Because all customers really want is to be heard. If they're upset, if they're not happy, be a good listener. And the better listener we can be, it just enables us to make customers understand that this is why we are the best company in town. We are differentiated. So there's this flow chart that you may also see in the book and in the customer service course. And it looks rather elaborate and rather complicated. And all it is a systemic flow. In the same way you would use a diagnostic chart to diagnose something, this is the way you would diagnose any customer problem. If the customer's got a problem and they're not behaving nicely, we revert to the split-second response. And the split-second response is just what we saw earlier. Pause, slow, deep breath, rational thinking, attentive listening, and preparing to say what you can do. And this is all part of what is called containment. Containment means you keep it within fixed limits. The opposite of containment is exacerbation, which means it blows up, it expands. And what we're containing is our emotions. We are controlling what we can control. Antoine and I had to talk about control. You can only control what's here. You can't control what's outside of your sphere. And all of us have a sphere of control. This is the sphere. You can control what you say, what you think, your rate of breathing, your tone of voice. All of that is within your sphere of control. But you can't control other people. However, the better you become at controlling what is within your sphere, then you are enabled to influence and persuade people outside of your sphere. So the better we get at controlling this, the better we become at influencing and persuading others. And that split-second response is what can enable someone to do that. And then you see the idea about venting, that venting can be therapeutic. Is the customer finished venting yet? Letting customers speak and letting customers get the story off of them chest. Most customers want to finish what they're saying. When I was a service manager and I had technicians working for me, I would often hear a technician listen to the first part of the symptom, but based on the model, the problem, the technician was really good. He hears these symptoms all day long. He knows what the fix is. And many technicians would jump in and try to assume what the fix was. But when that happens, customers think, I haven't told you yet. What are you trying to fix the problem for? Because customers want to finish. They want to vent. So even though we think we know what the fix is, let the customers finish. Many customers, if you interrupt them, may go back to the beginning of their symptom because they think you're not listening. Except the second time they start to yell a little more, and now you've taken a situation that was under control and it's become exacerbated. It's become worse because of something you've done. So maintaining that sense of control becomes key. And then also asking qualifying questions with that prefix, help me. It just invites the other person into a more constructive interaction. Very simple things to do when we consider what is important to customers.